Hey, today I'm going to talk about wine business, and there's kind of two sides of what I do. One is consumer research, consumer insights, and coming from a background, my interest in wine is entering into its 53rd year now. So I started really early, and I became a chef by training. In 1979, went full-time in the wine industry. Anybody from Atlanta, Georgia? Do you know Happy Herman's? Yeah, so I was actually the manager and wine bar and general manager for Happy Herman's in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, that resonated with people in the wine industry when you're in Bordeaux. What company do you represent? Happy Herman's? They go, Okay, so I've been in all facets of this interest or of this industry, and I am relentless. Nat DeBudio will attest to that for the years that I've been banging my head against different walls and whatever. But you'll never find anyone with a greater passion for the product and for the business of wine. So one of the things that I also do is I teach wine business. I've got brochures. I've got an 8-week online wine business course starting August 9th. And then I've got books on the sensory stuff. And tomorrow I'll be doing an hour workshop on consumer insights and what we really need to know about consumers that's not part of anybody's conversation in the wine industry today. I've actually got one of the graduates of my wine business course here. Hey, Roger. So, separating a passion for wine and separating the wine business is a really challenging thing to do. And one of the first things that I introduce in my wine business course that really smart people who have been very successful in business in other areas get really stupid when it comes to wine. And one of the problems that we have with the wine industry is there's so much, I'm going to call it fertilizer. And when I say that, it actually means bullshit, but I'm not going to say that word. And we've become so deluded about the history and so much about wine information that it makes a lousy basis to operate businesses, understand opportunities because of our misconceptions about wine history and traditions. And the bulk wine industry has always been a really, really essential part of the wine industry. And in fact, in the early through well into past the mid part of the 20th century, negociants and the wine industry was predominantly done through bulk wine, not through estates. What happened was companies learned that you could vertically integrate and add value and so forth by sending your kids to university, learning to make the wine, investing in the infrastructure. And, but I can't tell you how many people that come into my class and their thinking is bulk wine equals cheap wine, right? And so what I want to do is to erase that misconception, because bulk wines are bought and sold and traded at every level, from Plonk to literally cult wines. The history and the art of the blend is kind of where the misconceptions come from as well. The bulk wine is fundamentally material that is grapes that have been fermented, the juice in some sort of condition, but a final product. Another word that's very common in this business are shiners. Shiners are wines that are finished and completed and bottled with a neutral cork that are also traded in the market. And two of the advantages of understanding bulk wine and shiners is speed to market. If you look at a traditional, what we call estate model of a winery, you've got to find the real estate, you've got to prepare the land, plant the vineyards, you've got a period of time that you have to wait then for those vineyards to come into production and reach maturity. Then finally you can have a harvest. Then you can start the process of converting that raw material through the supply chain into finished wine that then has to be bottled and then maybe stored for a couple months to several years. And so it's like can potentially be a 10-year forecasting thing. So here's an opportunity. Oh, great, let's plant a vineyard, and in 10 years we'll have a product, and hope to hell the market's there. And sometimes it's not. So bulk wines are a big opportunity for so many businesses to take advantage of short-term opportunities, and shiners even more so, because you're actually looking for finished wine in the bottle, in the cork, and this is an art, you guys, and you can't even imagine how much of an art it is until you start to get into this process. Now, one of the things in my wine business course, we have labels that people can mock up, and along with financial modeling, and you sit down. Who's done a wine blending session before where they give you the different varieties? And it's fun, isn't it? Did you have a blast? Who's done a wine blending session where you actually have, for the wines you're blending, a cost per gallon that ranges from $5 to $30, and then you're seeing how much money you make or lose with your blend? Because that's the reality. I just got done with the blending project with one of my clients, and we were positioning a red blend. And this was actually going to be the lowest denominator of a line of wines. And it ended up being the second most expensive wine in the portfolio at about a 30% lower cost of goods of any other product. And guess what wine they're going to try and sell the hell out of? Because it's going to be a cash cow. So there's this incredible science involved in this, but there's this also art. Now, the history of blending, what's the predominant red grape variety of Bordeaux? Merlot. It's not Cabernet. There's 10 times more Merlot planted. So one of the myths is, oh, Merlot's a blending grape. No, it's not. It's the primary grape of Bordeaux. Now, in certain areas where there's different considerations for frost versus frost in the spring versus rain in the fall, this is what dictates what goes in the blend in Bordeaux. It is not some artsy, fartsy, fancy ass, oh, a little bit of this and a modicum of this, and it's going to give the, that's all fertilizer. It's not how it's done. You take the material that meets the criteria of what's going to go into the blend, you utilize as much of that material as you possibly can while maintaining your quality standard, and that's your blending. It's not some idea of the harmony and the balance of this and that. Is it good material or not? Does it meet the qualities of our state? Because anybody who's also done blending for long enough, you know that you do your assemblage of your high-end Cabernet or your first growth Bordeaux or whatever, and in 3 weeks it's a different animal. There's molecular changes and things going on. So again, it's this combination of art and science and business, and it's the business that most people don't understand about this. But the history of blending is not often what you read, and there's so much misinformation that a lot of people quite easily can misinterpret that Cabernet is the primary grape of the region when it's not. So that leads into this idea, okay, bulk wine is cheap wine, and that's how it goes. And the game of fact versus fertilizer is when you're looking at opportunities, when you're looking at products out here, when you're looking at business models and business planning, it gets really hard to separate the facts from the fertilizer to run a successful and sustainable business with blended wines, okay? And it's, for the most part, it's about maximizing profitability, and that's when they're doing the assemblage. Blending in the French term is called the assemblage, the assembling of the wines. And they're looking at maximizing profitability and being able to maintain their quality edge and so forth. So at Lafite Rothschild, they're looking at a combination of things. There's a great case study with Chateau Margaux, And it was owned by the Gineste firm for a long time, I believe from the late 50s and until the mid-70s. And the quality of Chateau Margaux had dropped quite noticeably against the other first growths, Lafite, Latour, Haut-Brion, et cetera. And the reason for that was actually because they were adding material into the final blend that did not support the quality level and the expectations of the high-end market. All right? So then Corinne Metsalopoulos bought Chateau Margaux in 1977, and in 1978, the quality just boom, right back up. And it's because she understood the imperative of balancing quality against maximum profitability. So part of the game of blending and what needs to be understood is this constant price-quality relationship between the products, and that goes for 2-Buck Chuck, and that goes for Chateau Margaux or any other high-end wine. And then the art versus science. If you've read the books, if you've taken the classes and whatever, everybody talks about the art of the blending. And that is wherein lies the fertilizer. So it's the business of blending that really, if you're looking at blending wines and buying bulk wines and selling and trading, it's really about more of the science and what you can do. Now, one of the other things to mention here, people think also bulk wine, you buy what you purchase and then that's it. That goes into your blend or that goes into the bottle and whatever. But there's so many options of what can be done to the bulk wine to improve qualities, to add characteristics, and to make improvements via science to the phenolic profile, to the aromatics, to the oak, and all these other things. So that's all part of the equation. And as I mentioned, flexibility and time to market becomes a real viable thing. Who's heard of Cameron Hughes? Anybody know how he started his business? Cameron Hughes went to a company that specialized in bulk wine. He played around with samples and came up with a blend and made up 2 bottles of it. So, and by the way, I may be also perpetuating lore and myth, but I'm an expert, so consider it might be the truth. And he asked then for enough of the material that went into a Napa Cabernet blend. He asked the bulk wine company to hold that for him. And he took his 2 bottles and he went up to Kirkland, Washington. Anybody know what's in Kirkland? Costco. And he said, I've got 2 bottles of wine here that I'd like you to sample. This is a Napa Valley 1977 Cabernet Sauvignon. I think it was 77, might have been 87. And it'll sell for $7.44 a bottle in your stores. And they tried it. They went, oh, this is awesome. How much do you have? And he said, I've potentially 10,000 cases. They said, okay, what do we do? So he signed this purchase order. He took the purchase order. He went to the bank. He got a loan on the purchase order. He ran back to the bulk wine company, said, let's do this. Let's bend it, bottle. And he had it done. So the role of the negociant is this intermediary and has played such an important part of this entire trade. And it's a gray market, if you will. Most people don't know it exists out there in the consumer world. But so many really great wines and great companies have been launched from negociants who then start to diversify and go into other areas. But it can still provide the crux and the cash flow in the centerpiece. When you're making wine, you're almost always blending it, unless you have one barrel that came from one vine and whatever. So blending is not just different varieties and again a bulk wine. Blending is an essential part of the business of every wine and trying to determine what kind of ultimate flavor profiles are you looking at? What do you have this block of Cabernet and this block of Cabernet, let alone some Merlot, Cabernet Franc over here, or different Rhone varieties? What's the number one wine that's the blending wine most used in the United States for Pinot Noir? Anybody know? Riesling. Yeah. And what are the 4 varieties of wine that can go into Côte de Nuit red Burgundies? Anybody know the 4? We teach that there's only one. It's only Pinot Noir, but you're allowed to add Pinot Bureau, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and also Pinot Blanc. So the 3 blending grapes are actually white wines. And they're planted there. Nobody's doing it anymore, but that used to be done to help eliminate some of the agricultural risk of just growing one single variety, but also the white wines tended to be easier to ripen in a lot of vintages and could add alcohol and structure to the wine, okay? The question is, who would buy bulk wines? Well, it could be because that's your primary business, that you're deciding you're going into that business, and it's all about the art of the blend. And you can create expensive wines that are consistent, that are opportunistically resourced, that sometimes are even self-liquidating. Hey, we created this blend because of an opportunity. Once it's gone, it's gone. So a couple of years ago, I was doing some consulting for one of my clients, and I actually needed, what did I need? What's the minimum quantity to run through a de-alcoholization thing? 280, no, it was smaller. It was about 280 gallons or something like that. And so I was shopping for high-end Chardonnay, and I through the whisper market. Now, this is also important. These programs, what Sid's doing here is this huge opportunity, because so much of the trading of bulk wines done through, hey, do you know anybody selling this? And it doesn't go into the classifieds. It doesn't go to the big brokerages or whatever. I've got some excess material. What do I do with it? So I was led to a winery that you would recognize at least the winemaker of, and they had 10,000 gallons of Napa Valley AVA barrel fermented, barrel aged Chardonnay, and they had another 10,000 of Rutherford. 10,000 was Coonsville, and the other 10,000 was Rutherford. I said, I need 280 gallons. They said, no problem. So they gave me what I needed. It was $15 a gallon. Yeah, but it gets better. The entire lot sold for $5 a gallon. And if you're prepared, if you've got a business that could say, hey, we're going to combine this, it's Napa Valley AVA, 20,000 gallons of a super high quality, really delicious, barrel fermented, barrel aged Chardonnay, you can't make it for a fraction of that. But there's a risk involved, because you're not going to do it again next year. It's going to be really, really hard to do that. So a lot of the bulk wine business is looking for why people are buying and selling, and it could be your primary product model. You might just be acting on an opportunity or a trend. Anybody notice that while everybody's waiting for Riesling to become the next big thing, Moscato blew its ass out of the market? So I actually started that with work I was doing with Trinchero. I did the ideation, the opportunity identification, and the product development for Moscato. And the way they were able to go from 125,000 cases where they were when I started the work with them to 3.5 million cases was not going to be by planting vineyards, but by sourcing from all over the world and taking advantage of an opportunity that presented itself. And the other thing about blending wines and operating in the bulk wine business, when there's vintage shortages, when you've got sales forecasts for a certain wine, it's it's very important to be able to leverage those opportunities and buy from the bulk wine pool to augment your own wines that you might be having on more of an estate model. There are limitations depending on how you're positioning and labeling your wines, but all sorts of opportunities there. And then the selling of the bulk wines is you might have excess inventory. So somebody's making a really high-end Cabernet or blend or Rhone or Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or you name it, and their sales forecasts, and they know, can only accommodate so much product going through the system. And so they actually might sell off then any excess inventories that doesn't match to their sales plan. So this happens, and this is where supply and demand comes into the picture with the bulk wine industry and really driving what the opportunities are or are not, and whether, what kind of supplies and what kind of pricing are available. And the other thing is wines that don't meet the standards. All right, now, it used to be in Bordeaux that the great chateaus would sell off the wines that did not meet the standards to go into their assemblage for their high-end products. But then more and more wineries are saying, well, what if we continued sort of along the supply chain and we integrated more and had more of a finished product? So almost all the Bordeaux properties now have their own second labels to take materials that did not meet the standard for the first line of wines, the Lafittes and so on, but are still really good wines. So they come from younger vines, or something happened to one variety and not the others. And so you'll also find that that wines that do not meet the standards are in the bulk wine, but it's not the way everybody thinks. Some of these wines are actually very, very high quality for another price tier that the producer might not be focusing on or have the ability to handle in the sales and marketing. And so also then production just is greater than your careful sales projections say you can sell. So gives you a chance to convert some of that wine into more instant cash, improve your cash flow, reduce your production to accommodate the sales. And it could be just friggin' leftovers. We decided to blend a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we got to where we want to be, and now this material's left over. What are we going to do it? The godsend to that is the explosion of the red blend category, because people can take their leftovers, turn it over to marketing, say, wow, this is really delicious. Okay, we need some cockamamie story to go with this shit, because it's all these weird leftovers all blended together, and so you make it into something fancy. And that's actually working against people that are in the bulk. It's creating much more competition for bulk wines, but it's also at the selling point, it's lowering a lot of the availability because of this new opportunity. And then, of course, things like sweet red wines that are coming up and whatever. So as there's a more of a diversification of style and of labels and so on, it makes the market harder to play in. So basically what we look at is market decisions and strategies and conducting a SWOT analysis. If you're interested in going into the wine business with bulk wines or spirits, and pretty much all this applies to spirits as well as just wine. And the primary what's the wine type and style that you're looking to go in? Is it a varietal wine? Does it have to be of a certain appellation? What kind of price point is it going to be at? And what kind of material is available? My partner and I, who are not in the wine business, had to pass on an offer that we almost, it was like, oh, how can we make this work? And it was, somebody made the mistake of blending 15% Oregon Pinot Noir and 85% California Pinot Noir, which meant legally it had restrictions of where and how it could be sold and whatever. And it was kick-ass Pinot Noir. And we had an accepted offer of $2 a gallon. And we were just trying to figure out how the hell do we make it work, because we could have hit a really strong price point, really high profitability level. So, and then the origin really comes in hand, and this is why this wine was so cheap, was because they made a mistake of origin. But still, it doesn't matter if you're in a winery in Delaware or in Texas or Istanbul or whatever. You also have to look at your wine style, the price point, and then what's the market expectations for an origin. Can you get away with doing a really flexible? If anybody wants a fabulous case study of success in the bulk wine arena, look at Conundrum, which is now its own separate brand. Conundrum used to be the name of a style of wine at a low price point with an origin of Napa Valley. And it used to sell for $7.99 a bottle, and it's become so successful it's now a California appellation, meaning they can, the material they've got available to work with is like all over the place. They've completely lowered the cost of the wine going into it, and it's now selling for $25 a bottle, and they've added a red to the white and totally spun it off from Camus. All right. What are the special attributes you're looking for? And special attributes are all part of that little bottom bullet that apparently I didn't have my slide transition thing on. And that's what kind of story can you tell about the wine? So in the marketing, in the positioning, and to be an artist and a successful business person in the world of bulk wine, you know, with the right story, it's just amazing what can be done. The unique features about the product, wine with food, don't get me started, and then describing it and telling that story, okay? So, I've got a lot more slides. I won't bore you with it, but I would love to answer any questions anybody has that I might be able to answer about bulk wine and the bulk wine business. One other thing I'd like to say is more and more pressure on the bulk wine industries is being created by something called Buyer's Own Brand, or BOB. And this is where grocery stores and restaurant chains and hotels have private labels. They've got a team of buyers or are working with companies who are specialists. And instead of taking branded wines, they're putting their own brand. Kirkland wines are a great example of this from Costco, and the list kind of goes on. Now, what's interesting is 20, 30 years ago, there were a couple of specialty wineries that worked in this buyer's own brand realm, Bacigalupi and so forth, but the consumers wouldn't respond to it. So it kind of dwindled and disappeared, but it's coming back with a vengeance, and especially as we're getting new consumers and millennials in particular, who oftentimes just don't give a crap about our values and our stories that we're telling. So the market's constantly shifting, the opportunities are rising and falling, and so forth. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.